30-minute apps and more. Episode 9, Workspace Customization with App Engine Studio. This demonstration is going to use the Riddick application that was created in a previous episode. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate how to customize an application workspace homepage and the list navigation. Application is going to be a business workspace to track active project concerns. Specifications are to configure the workspace homepage design and layout, customize the homepage components and presentation, and lastly, modify the workspace list navigation and layout. The audience for this video is going to be project managers and ITIL users. First, we'll start out by taking a look at the homepage design and layout overview, talking a bit about how things are laid out and how you can add and remove components on your homepage. Then we'll move to customizing the components to utilize them for your application's needs, modifying the data visualizations as well as adding graphical data visualizations. And then we'll also customize the presentation of the data visualization and workspace containers. Lastly, we'll look at modifying the list navigation and layout by adding and removing list items, adding and removing list options, and changing the list order. So let's go ahead and get into the App Engine Studio and take a look at customizing our workspace homepage and list. So first off here, I've already got an application created called Riddick, and inside of there I've already added some database tables from a previous exercise to save a little time. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create a workspace for this application. In doing so, we'll go ahead and click on the experience selection, and you have the option of creating a portal, mobile, catalog items, or a workspace. We'll look at the portal and mobile applications in a later exercise, but for now we're going to concentrate on creating a workspace and customizing the home page. So we'll go ahead and click on workspace, and we'll click begin. Now it will ask us to specify some common information as well as any roles that we want to include. I'm just going to go ahead and accept the defaults and click continue. We do have to change the tables for this application. We'll go ahead and set the primary to Riddick, and then we'll add in the action items and options as the secondary tables. I'll go ahead and click continue, and this will generate the workspace for us. You can see it's rather quick to generate that, and now we can see that we've got another entry under experience that is our workspace. I'll go ahead and click into that, and that will open up the design view of the workspace. Okay, now we've got the design view for the actual workspace homepage. We can see up here in the left-hand section that under page that we are looking at the home page. So again, we're going to concentrate on the home page and the list section. And we can see by default it adds a couple data visualization counters for my tasks, unassigned tasks, and critical tasks, as well as my work, which is tasks that have been assigned, as well as the my work section, which is a listing of all tasks assigned to me. You can see that it generates some labels or titles above some of the sections. We'll take a look at how to modify those as well. Now, this design view is laid out with components. As I click in, we can see that this is a text component, and then we have 3 data visualization components, as well as a My Work section and a simple list. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the design view. You can see that there is a right-hand pane here that lists all of the configuration settings for the component that's selected. The selected component is highlighted in purple, depending on the component itself. Sometimes you'll see a blue box around something, such as that. That's just the different types of components. Once we select a component, we can see that the left-hand pane changes. So that is for stylized text. You'll see for the data visualizations, there is a bit more information. You also have a presentation view for the data visualizations. For the simple list, you can see that you have the ability to modify the columns listed as well as the filters applied. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to customize this Workspace homepage. We're going to start by looking at the stylized text component. Happening now might not be something that you want to display. You might want something a little more appropriate for your application. So we'll just call this the Riddick Control Center, and we will use an H2 tag, which will increase the size of the label. Once we've got this, we can go ahead and click Save. And I'm going to take you back a step here, and we're actually going to bring up the web view for the workspace itself. So to do that, I've gone back into the App Studio on the app homepage for Riddick, and underneath Experiences, we find the workspace, and there is a preview button. You can also get to the preview through the menu items on the right, but we'll go ahead and click Preview, and you'll see that opens up a new tab, and now we can see the web version of our Workspace homepage. And we can see that the latest update that I made is already in place here with the 3 counters that we have and the space below. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back in, and we're going to modify the data visualizations that we have. First off, we're going to move them around a bit. So let me explain how these are contained right now. First of all, they're in a single container. We can see that the layout for that container is 3 columns. So I'm going to actually make this 4 because we're going to add 1 additional data visualization. So first off, I'm going to move this My Tasks visualization. So to do that, we can just click and drag that over until we see this highlighted section here. I'm going to move each of these over. And then I'm going to add another data visualization here. To add components to your home page, you simply select the components icon in the left bar, and that will bring up all of the components that are available. We're looking for a data visualization. So I can type in to filter out the list. I typed in data, and we can now see data visualization. If we click and drag that over to the area we'd like it displayed. So now we've got to customize this data visualization. So first off, I'm going to add a data source, and we're going to use the Riddick table that I've already brought into the application, and we'll go ahead and add this source. Once I do that, you can see that there's no filtering on the table, so it's actually pulling back all of the Riddicks that are available. So we're going to give this a title. And again, once we click off that, we can see that the title appears in place there. I actually take this data visualization, and we're going to move it for temporary purposes. We're going to move that over. I'm going to bring the unassigned back, and then we're going to move this total risk decisions data visualization to the first one. So now we see that we've got total risks, issues, and decisions. Critical tasks is not something that we're going to need for the purposes of this application, so we're going to go ahead and modify this one. We're going to call this closed risk issues and decisions, and we're just going to give it a short acronym. Click off of there and we can see that this changes. But now we've got to actually change the query that goes along with that. So we're going to click on the data source and we can see that we've got active equal to true and priority equals 1, which is critical. We're going to go ahead and edit that, and we're going to remove the priority, select and, select state is one of, and again select all of the closed options. Okay, we're going to go back into the query one more time, and this time we're going to remove the active equal to true condition because the closed risk issue or decision does not have an active status. So now we see that we've got one closed RIDIC. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and move this over to make it a little more appropriate. Okay, so now we've got total risks, unassigned, and we'll go ahead and modify this to be RIDS, which stands for risk issues and decisions. And we've got none assigned to me at this point. Reason for that is because I'm using the developer instance. Okay, so now that we've got the data visualizations the way that we would like them, we're going to actually add in another data visualization, and this time it's not going to be a counter, it's actually going to be a graph. So in order to do that, let's take a look first at the layout that we have. We've got a 4-column layout, and what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to add another container below the one that we currently have, and I'm going to add in a data visualization to that. And this time again we're set with no data source, so we need to apply the data source. That data source again is going to be the RIDIC table. And in this case, we're going to add some custom conditions. So the first thing we want to do is add in the state field because we're looking to specify the RIDICs by type. So in order to do that, we're going to actually add in the state field and make sure that that is one of either pending, open, or work in progress. We don't want this to be any of the completed states. And we see this comes up as a counter, number 5. So we're going to add in the label here. So we're going to go ahead and select the visualization type. And in this case, we're using a single score for the other ones. We're going to actually select horizontal bar for this one. And lastly, we need to group these. So right now they're grouped by active. We're going to actually group them by RIDIC type, which is one of the fields identifying the different types of RIDICs. And we can see here that we've got 1 decision, 2 risk, and 2 issue. You can see that it gives a legend identifying what each of the bars are, as well as a label to the left-hand side. This is a nice visualization for a user to get a good idea of how those RIDs are broken down. Now we've got our data visualizations, our counters in place. We've added a 4th counter, and we've also added another data visualization within a new container that displays a horizontal graph of the RIDs by type. One thing we need to remember before this will display or refresh within our Workspace browser itself, we need to make sure that we save this information because we've got it here in our design view, but we haven't saved that. So now once we save that and go back to our Workspace view and refresh, now we'll see that this is updated accordingly. And now we can see that we've got our counters across the top along with our horizontal bar graph and all the updates that we made. I'm going to go back and make a couple more changes. These counters take up quite a bit of space, so we're actually going to reduce the size of them to shrink down the area that it takes. Right now it's displaying fine, but when we have some data in here, we will want more screen real estate. So let's go back there and click on the data visualization. And this time we're going to go into the presentation view. We're going to select the small size for the score, and we're going to select a color as well. And in this case, we'll just make this blue. So we can see this takes up less space. We'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other ones. We'll select, and I haven't found a way to select each of them together in a group and have the ability to change them all as one. It is a little tedious, but as you can see, it's fairly quick to be able to change these the way that I am. We'll go into the last one here. Again, we go to the presentation tab, score size, change that to small. Then we'll go into the color type. We'll select a single color and we'll type in blue. This brings up all the options of blue, and there we go. So again, let's make sure that we save. We'll go back to the Workspace homepage and we'll refresh that. And now we'll see the numbers or the counters are a bit smaller, giving us a bit more screen real estate down below. And we've changed the color as well. Before we move on to customizing the My Work section below, we're going to take a look at this last data visualization, the My RIDs, My Risks, Issues, and Decisions. As we can see, this data visualization has two filters on it. Active is true and assigned to is system administrator. If we go and take a look at the RIDs that are out there that are unassigned, and we take a look at one of them, we can see that under the assigned to, we don't see the system administrator here. So if we sort by first name, there is no system administrator. So I cannot assign one of the RIDs to myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually modify the assignment on this. I do have two assigned RIDs that are assigned to one of the managers and as well as the ITIL user. So I'm going to change this to say is assigned to ITIL user or is assigned to the problem manager. So I'll go ahead and click apply, and now we see that we are identifying two of the RIDs that are assigned. We can see here, if we go take a look at all of them, one is assigned to the problem manager and one is assigned to the ITIL user. So if we go back here, we'll see this being updated. Again, we need to save that in order to see that in our actual workspace, not just in the design workspace. If I now refresh that, we'll see that this value gets updated as well. Okay, now one other thing to note is that you can click on these counters and it will take you into a list display for that query. So in this case, the two RIDs that are assigned to either managers or ITIL users, you can see that those come up there. If we want to look at the unassigned RIDs, we click on the counter and it'll show us each of the unassigned. So for instance, I can go in here and assign one of those. And I thought we said problem manager. We're going to actually select problem administrator this time. And we're going to save that. And then we're going to come back to the portal view or the workspace view. We'll refresh this. And now that we see we've got two unassigned. But over here, we don't see this updated. And that is because the query behind that is specifically for the problem manager. Okay, we can change that to assign, it contains and we can just put problem. That way either of the problem manager or administrators will show up there. We should see this value change to 3. If we save that and go back to our workspace and refresh this, we can always click on that to take us into that list, and we can see here's our problem manager, administrator, and ITIL user. Okay, so next let's move down to the My Work section. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to modify the label to this. So this runs in the same situation as the data visualization above, where it's not going to identify any records assigned to me. So we're going to modify this to go after the managers and ITIL users, as we did with the data visualization above. So I'm going to change this, click off, we'll see that change. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is modify the query or the filters that are on that. So in this case is dynamic. We're going to change that to is ITIL user, or I assigned to is, or in this case contains problem, and we'll apply. So now we see some records showing up down below. So let's do a couple things. Let's modify the column headers to give a bit more information. First thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to add the actual assigned to person. So we'll go ahead and add that in, and I will move that up. So this looks a little better now. Let's clean that up a little bit by removing the max rows. Let's go ahead and get rid of the header, so that moves that up. And actually I'll go ahead and add that back in, so this way we get the refresh button. But we might want to do other things like hide the links that are there, the view all in the footer, or an empty state, and so forth. But I think that that will work there. But again, you can control what you want to see, whether you want to see this refresh button. We'll say hide refresh. If you don't want to see that header area, we can hide that as well. Once we save that, we'll come back to our workspace page and we'll refresh this. And now we will see that we've got the latest data visualization change in place, as well as the My Work section. Now, you wouldn't normally do this. It depends on your situation. You would normally be able to get that user to show up here with some information, but in this case I'm not able to assign those to myself, so this is just giving you an idea of how you can manipulate or customize these views. Before we move on from that topic, let me expand on that a bit. When you have data visualizations that have data sources connected to them and you apply filters, as we did over here behind the simple list and behind the data visualizations, as well as the horizontal bar, they're all tied to a data source, and that data source applies to a table obviously and has a filter on it. And earlier I noted that because of the developer instance and I was assigned the system administrator role, I didn't have that option to select myself to assign any of those RIDICs. So what I'm going to do now is show you how this feature regarding assign to is dynamic me should actually work. If we take a look at the workspace now, we can see that we've got the data visualizations up top showing the numbers. This my RID shows 3 because if you remember, we applied it to the ITIL user, the problem manager, and administrator. And we're going to take those out. So those would dynamically display tasks assigned to the current user. So we're going to go back to the App Engine Studio, and we're going to go into that component, and we're going to edit that filter, and we're going to change that filter to say is dynamic, and that'll be default to me. Now you can also select one of my approvers approvals, my assignments, and so forth. Okay, so we're also going to change this data source filter up here as well. This is in a bit different view, but the same logic. We're going to take out one of the assignments, and we will make this one is dynamic as well. Okay, once we save that, I'm still logged in as the system administrator. So if I refresh this page, we should see 0 for both of those values. So we've got 0 up there, nothing showing below. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to impersonate the problem manager. That means that the rest of this information should be the same, and this area down below should have one item in it. That is, it should have one RIDIC in it, which is assigned to this user. So let me modify the logged in user and impersonate the problem manager. And I'll come back to my workspace and refresh. And now we should see both of these showing 1 and 1 here. This is how that feature would generally work. My example was to do a workaround to show you that you could assign those filters differently and to different users and so forth. Now that we've covered most of the areas we want to talk about with regard to the Workspace homepage, we're going to shift gears now and talk a little bit about the list navigation. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to change our design view here, go from the home page to the list page. And if we click back on the workspace, we can see once we click list that we've got 3 modules or menu items. That's one for each of the tables that we added. Now, since the options and action items are specific to child records for the RIDIC table, it's not necessarily needed. If we go into one of the RIDICs, we can see that based on how this was set up, that we can see the options and action items for that RIDIC. So in this case, we don't really need the action items or the options, and I'll show you how we can remove those. If we go back to the App Engine Studio, we've already clicked on, and we can see that we've got our list here. Again, these are based on components, as you see. I'm going to go ahead and click on the navigation list, and you can see it's of list nav type. So once we click on that, you can see that our right side pane changes, and we can see the configuration settings for that list. Now, in order to modify that list, we're going to click on the Okay, so now we'll see this RIDIC menu config. Anytime you're going to modify this by clicking on the configuration button in the App Engine Studio, you're going to be looking for the application name menu config. We'll go ahead and click on that. That's going to take us in, and now you can see the 3 options that we have. They're all set to active equal to true. So at a quick glance, the first thing that we can do to change these is simply change this to false. Okay, what that's going to do is not display that option or that menu. So we've got those in place, we've saved those. We'll go ahead and refresh the browser view, and we can see now in our list we've only got the items from the RIDIC table. That's our only menu option with 4 items below that. So you can see that the column headers in each of these are the same. If we wanted to modify the column headers in there, we can do that as well through the same configuration. So in this case, let's modify the all option under RIDIC. So we'll go back into our UX list menu config, and we'll select RIDIC. Then we'll select all, because we want to modify the all. And you can see down at the bottom we've got columns. So if we click on that lock button, which unlocks the available and selected columns. We're going to go ahead and remove the priority, and we'll go ahead and add in the Riddick type. And then we'll move that up and we'll update. So now if we come back to our workspace and we refresh, now we'll see that we've got the Riddick type there and the priority has been removed. One thing to note here is that you want to leave the number field as the first column. The first column is the column that will identify a link to the detailed view for that record. If you went and switched it, for instance, if we put state as the first column, the link would be on the state options. Now, the link data would still take you to the correct information, but it doesn't really make sense in this case. We'd want to be selecting one of these options. And in this case, we can't select and dive into it. We can do it here, but you'll see that 1011 is the record that we go into. It makes it a little more confusing. So what we'll want to do is make sure that we always leave that number field as the first field in the list. So I'll put that back, I'll update that, and refresh my view. Okay, so we've taken a look at how to remove items from the list. We've also taken a look at how to modify the column headers that are displayed within a list. Next, we're going to take a look at how we can reorder options within the list. So we'll go ahead back to our configuration. We'll click all, and we can see that up in the upper right, we've got an order field. So if we go back and take a look at some of the others, for instance, let's look at the open. It's 10. And actually we can see it right here, 30, 40, and 50. So if we wanted to change the order of this, for instance, put it in alphabetical order or put the all first, we would simply go in to that order number and change that. In this case, we'll put 5, and if we go here and refresh this, we'll now see that all shows up first. One other thing that we can do here, we saw that we were able to remove or not display some of the menu items or lists. We can do the same thing to the options underneath the menu item. So in this case, we'll go back and we'll take a look at the unassigned. And we'll go in and we'll deselect the active field. And once we come back and refresh our view, we'll see the unassigned option removed. One other thing that we can do here is modify the names of the default items in the list. So this menu option here, or the item, is Riddick, and then we have the options below it. If we wanted to modify that name for whatever reason, we wanted to change that, we could simply do that here and refresh this. We'll see that change. And we can do the same thing for the items underneath it. Again, you can always double click near a all records near a field and go directly in and modify the contents of that field, or you can click on the item and go up to the title and modify that there. So again, if we refresh this, we'll see that you can modify this as well. Okay, so we talked about removing items from this list, modifying the names and or options directly. We talked about modifying the column headers, as well as the importance to leave the number field in place. So for a quick recap, we took a look at the homepage design and layout overview inside of the App Engine Studio, and We looked at each of the components that were used in the default, and we modified that and customized those components to meet our needs. We also updated the presentation of those data visualizations as well as the simple list at the bottom. And then lastly, we took a look at modifying the list navigation and layout by adding and removing list items, adding and removing menu options, as well as changing list order. Thanks for joining me today. That was 30-Minute Apps, Episode 9, Workspace Customization with App Engine Studio. I'm Kelly Bridgeman. Take care.